Hey, hello, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started with our session. My name is Mara Huber, and I'm joining you from the University at Buffalo in Buffalo, New York. And I am joined by some colleagues who are going to introduce themselves as they take their turns with the slides. But I'm going to go ahead and get us started by sharing. I'm going to share a figure that I think is quite compelling and has inspired at least my work in some of this panel. And this is a figure that appeared in a guidebook, a partnership guidebook, put out by the United Nations and the Partnering Institute in 2022. So this is very recent. And I really liked this image that I think suggests an ecosystem approach to the SDGs. And this notion that not all types of engagement are equal and not all impacts are equal, that there's some clustering of SDGs. And this idea that if we're able to sort of cut across some of the goals and targets, we can catalyze change. And this really got me thinking about higher education ecosystems. So for those of you who are at universities or are affiliated with colleges and universities, we have our own ecosystems, and we have layers and layers of stakeholders and different potential impacts. And I think this is a great way to think about both the complexity and the potential of higher education partnerships. So when we think about these layers of potential, let's see if I can get these slides going. We think of different types of stakeholders and different potential impacts, but those impacts are also associated with their own sets of constraints, right? So we have students who have the potential to share projects and skills and their career paths. This is the work that I do through experiential learning. But in order for them to share those impacts, they're looking for certain deliverables themselves, right? So students need credits and they need degrees. They certainly need letters of recommendations and references and connections. And faculty, I always say that faculty are like the holy grail in the sense that they have so many potential impacts associated with them through their teaching and expertise, research, support. There's just so much that can be leveraged, and yet there are many constraints associated with their engagement. Teachers and professors and researchers need grants, and they need time, and they need alignment with their own research and their own professional focus. And we could go on and on through the various stakeholders that are within higher education institutions. And so what I want to suggest going into this conversation is that there is so much to offer, and it is certainly worthy of our collective effort and focus. But the work is different work. And it requires new levels of strategic facilitation, as well as some frameworks and models. This work of sort of catalytic transformational partnerships takes us well beyond the role of higher education as convener or any particular layer of our ecosystem. So I want to suggest that we need, at minimum, a few components in place that we need to consider when we go through some of these impacts. First of all, we need spaces or places for showcasing this work and for facilitating and designing it. So digital spaces where we can showcase key partners, where we can invite in stakeholders, and we can really look at this work of catalyzing the SDGs through multi-stakeholder partnerships. We need to make sure we're inviting stakeholders in ways that will resonate with their work. And we need to be able to sort of capture these impacts and leverage them towards broader impacts. So this is the work that we've been doing through our experiential learning network at the University at Buffalo. So I want to suggest that even though this might seem a little daunting, it is completely possible, and it's very exciting. I will, when I'm done speaking, I will put a link to a recent book chapter that we have on our model, as well as some of our facets of our website, so that you can poke around. I'm happy to share. But what I want to offer is just the essence of our approach before we get started with introducing my colleagues, just to show how these dynamic tools can be developed and how they can be utilized. So first, we have what we call our project portal, which is exactly what I suggested. It's this dynamic space for inviting in engagement around the SDGs and other types of priorities. So we have a searchable portal where students can find projects. So we focus on mentored projects. We have a very nice inclusive definition. So in our model, anything can be a project as long as it's mentored, collaborative, and results in something meaningful that adds value. So we have a space. We invite in proposals for new projects. We have about 276 the last time I looked. Students can search these, and we can also showcase partners doing the work of the SDGs and invite in engagement. So it can be very broad. We can introduce challenges, partners, possibilities, or it can be very specific. So that's the first piece that we use. The second piece is that framework for facilitating engagement. But not only do we want to facilitate engagement, we want to capture the value that comes from that engagement. So this might be sort of a new way to think about experiential learning, but engagement sort of spins off outputs, right? And those outputs are valuable and can be built upon, and they can be connected back to targets and goals. But we need a way to do that. And so we developed a framework that is very simple. It's called PEARL, and it stands for prepare, which is setting some intentions, developing some skills and competencies. The E and the A are engage and add value. So you're engaging, but the engagement is to add value to some identified audience. And then reflect is integrating into goals and objectives. And then that leveraging is about building further capacity. So we use PEARL and online prompts to guide students while they are working through projects. But that PEARL framework also allows us to capture data along the way. So we can examine impacts and we can sort of build on them. The final piece is our digital badges. So we use digital badges as a way to capture those outputs. So students are uploading their final product to show what they've done to add value. They are able to leverage that by putting their badge on LinkedIn or a digital resume, and then they can build on it, but we can also build on it as well. So the badges capture metadata, and imagine that we can track these badges, and then we can continue to build value around them. Okay, so this is sort of the system that we have in place at the University of Buffalo. With this system and with a dynamic system in place and these tools, we can transform engagement into an engine, if you will, for sustainable development. So we can use these and sort of target our resources and target our tools to focus on a specific area or specific partners. So this is the work that I want to give you a glimpse into today, hopefully inspire you to see that it is in fact possible to really support these types of catalytic partnerships. And we're going to focus on our work with a region in Tanzania. It's actually the Mara region in northern Tanzania. I began going in 2009 and really trying to lay a foundation for these types of partnerships. But we're going to start with our work in 2014, which is when we began to formalize a study abroad. So this is one glimpse into how you might lay the foundation for these types of engagement. And for us, it was really through study abroad. And I'm excited to introduce my colleague, Dr. Dan Nyaranga, who was completely instrumental in getting this off the ground and continuing to help evolve the course as our interests and our focus has changed. So Dan, take it away.
Thanks, Mara. My name is Dr. Dan Nyaranga. I'm a professor of psychology and human development at SUNY Empire State. And I'm also affiliated with the University at Buffalo through the study abroad program that we launched in 2014. Next slide. Okay, I think you went too far. It's just one. Okay. Now, when we started the study abroad program and we laid this kind of foundation, there were a number of ideas that we had in mind. Originally, it was more of a traditional study abroad program where you would take students to visit a country and they would be able to learn what is going on in those countries. And for us, it was the same way. It was more of trying to explore. But for me, this was a personal thing for me compared to anybody else on my entourage or anybody else that I wanted to travel with. And it's because I was born in this particular region of Tanzania, the Mara region. And the first thing I wanted to leverage the relationship and create opportunity for student, faculty, and everybody to see this part of the world. A lot of students I travel with, I've never been to this part of the country, and they were eager. Students are always eager to learn, eager to know, eager to feel, eager to touch, especially this Gen Z generation that want to do more compared to just reading a book and then moving forward. So they wanted to see all this and to be able to learn. And also opportunity for those who are back in Tanzania. This picture that you see in front of you is a classroom. I sat in one of those desks, and even up to recently when this picture was taken, the situation hasn't changed. The wall, the ceiling, the desk, everything the same. And even the chalkboard that they're using for writing is exactly the same. The same type of uniform I wore back then. So everything is exactly the same as it was, with the dusty floor, over 100 kids in a classroom. I wanted to see a student to be able to see that and to see how much we have that they probably don't have, and all the opportunity we have that they probably take for granted. And I wanted these kids also to see there's more than just sitting in those desks, that there's a way outside that classroom, that to build them, to inspire them, that they can get out of there and become better. So those are some of the things I had in my mind. So another thing was a chance to introduce students to my home country. And by introducing to my own country is for them to be able to understand the culture rather than just learning it through the Discovery Channel or CNN or any other news network. I wanted them to know the culture and to know how it is. We live in a global village where, I mean, the world has become so small that you meet those individuals from the other part of the world and you interact with them. It's better to know the context and to know where people come from, even when they speak. So that was very important to me. Now, with regard to our first trip, which I call phase one, 2014 to 2015, when we launched the study abroad, there were areas of interest before we even left. We wanted to explore this issue of awareness of human rights. We wanted to know more about that. We wanted to know more about women's empowerment. How do we empower those women who live there? We want students to clarify their goals and their career goals to determine if that is the path that they would like to take or a different path, because when you have a lot of undergraduate, there are a lot who have not even decided which way they want to go. So that is one of the things that traveling gave them opportunity to do. We also had in mind issues of sustainability, climate change, and global development. Those are some of the things that we had in mind as we went to explore this part of the world. Now, with regard to our trip, we had a diversity of students that we went with. They were from different majors and different backgrounds. So we had psychology, sociology, anthropology. We had engineering students, we had nursing students, and it was across. And we also travel with students from different campuses, SUNY at Buffalo, SUNY Fredonia, SUNY Albany. So it was a diverse group that all had the same interest. And we traveled to a number of areas in Tanzania, starting with Dar es Salaam, which is the capital of Tanzania. And we had a number of organizations there we affiliated with at the beginning that we talked to. UNHCR, one of them, Child Dignity Forum that focus on female genital caring. That's another organization. We flew to Mwanza by the Lake Victoria region, the biggest lake in Africa. From Mwanza, by road, we went to the Mara region in Msoma. That is where bulk of our project focus, visiting schools, and that is the place I said I was born and raised. Now, from Mara region, we went to Serengeti and Ngorongoro. Ngorongoro, the interest was more to see this issue of sustainability. How do the Maasai group of people live side by side with animals to protect the environment? We wanted to know that. And the first human species that is also Meriliki is also found in this part of the world in Ngorongoro. So students had interest to learn all that while we are in Tanzania. We were able to connect with the nonprofit and community-focused organization, faith-based organization, because some of those organizations like faith-based are the ones that are running some of those projects that empower women in the Mara region. We are also able to meet higher education partners like Boare Community Development Training Institute, Open University of Tanzania, and a number of other organizations. And as we travel across the country, the whole idea was to cultivate also new partners, to build more network. We just didn't want to get stuck with a few that we started with. We wanted to increase the number of partners that can work with our students. So at the end of the trip, we had this dissonance project where students will be able to enhance discipline, knowledge, problem-solving skill, global and cultural competency. All these are from ASC and EU LEAP value rubrics that we use to be able to, and all this was for the benefit of our students. The next slide. Next. Okay, now the third trip, the third phase of our trip was in 2018. We kept evolving, but this particular part of the trip, we reframed it around idea of adding value. Remember, the first one was more of exploring. The second one is when we introduced the dissonance project, where students will be able to incorporate those ASCU value or rubrics. Now, this third one was to add value. And the reason and the idea behind it is that as we kept traveling to Tanzania for those number of years, we asked ourselves, what is it for them over there? Much as our students are benefiting, going and coming back, they're writing their project, they're completing their project, but what about for them? What about for them? For us to sustain this relationship, we thought about adding value to some of the projects we visited. So that is some of the things we look at in our final project and the proposal when students came back to the United States. We continue engaging with these partners even as students came back to the US. We customize those projects based on student interest. There were core areas that we focus on with regard to women empowerment. One of the areas that touched a lot of our students was forced marriages. And we were able to engage with CDF, or Child Dignity Forum, with regard to that. Actually, we made a second trip going back to Tanzania because there were students who exclusively wanted to work with this organization. Female genital caring was another area. We visited a place in one area called Mugumu, which is near Serengeti, where it's in a safe house where women would run away from their parents during cutting season for them to have a safe place until the season is over. So students were also interested in female genital caring. School dropout was another area that really inspired a lot of students to get involved. And at that particular time, there are those students who actually engage actively by sending the organization, those who work with the Hope Revival Center, to go to training in Arusha region in Tanzania so that they can come back to their community and make reusable sanitary pads that will be able to help the girls so that they don't drop out of school. So in the phase 4 of our project, which we're continuing with, is about building capacity and empowerment and social entrepreneurship. That was interested in leveraging this collaboration that we already have with these community members as a way of building capacity, especially around the reusable sanitary pads and the training component of it. And this also opened to new ideas and innovation. And this actually came to fruition during COVID, where we really ramp up effort in harvesting new projects, and the technology played a greater role, visual engagement with this community, because students could not travel anymore to the Mara region of Tanzania. Thank you so much. Mara, picking up from there.
Thank you, Dan. So this trip continues to evolve. You're going to hear about an upcoming trip this January that will be the first that we've been able to host in a couple of years. But one of the themes that Dan emphasized was this notion of connecting students with the organizations on the ground who are doing the work of the SDGs within the most vulnerable communities and ecosystems. So think about it. If we can connect our students and our faculty with these partners, we can really add value in ways that are going to be transformative. So I am so excited to introduce our partners from Tanzania who will be hosting our students this January and can share a little bit more about the potential of higher education engagement to connect with their work. Now, just a note of caution, perhaps. Connectivity is always the biggest challenge for our engagement. And so we're all going to keep our fingers crossed that we'll be able to hear from our partners directly, but I'll be ready to step in if we have any connection problems. So I'm going to introduce Kennedy, if you can unmute, and Zachariah, and see if you can introduce yourselves to the group.
Thank you, Mara. Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well. Please continue.
Yes, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Kennedy Mahiri, Executive Director of Cloud. I'm with my colleague, Zachariah, the project manager or coordinator in our organization. Cloud is a collective indigenous marginalized women, disadvantaged youth, vulnerable groups, and people living with disability. Cloud founded in 2014 and formalized in 2016. We are headquartered in Mwanza, Tanzania. We Cloud, we are focusing on the vulnerable population, women, youth, disabled, and people with albinism. In Tanzania, many people lack access to education, job, and healthcare. Climate change is adding vulnerability with deforestation and sickness related to polluted water and unhealthy cooking. So we work to empower vulnerable communities to support their own needs through community innovation, projects that generating revenue and addressing sustainability to the communities. You have various activities that you are running in your communities, but here we can mention some few, but we are running many projects in Tanzania. For instance, we are having an innovation of brick making. The brick making is one of the innovative projects that Cloud introduced, where we work with the community to make interlocking bricks using a hand-powered press and available materials that surrounding our community. Bricks are always used to build affordable houses, and also using to build water tanks. We use it also to build latrines. And this technology really is friendly of environment, since it protects our environment, because many people just use to cut trees for building their houses. For the existence of our project of making bricks, it helps them to avoid cutting trees, so make our environment to be friendly. We have also running a project we known as water catchment tank. We are just building the tank that can able to capture water for the rainwater or any system of water by using the tank. Water is a major challenge in Tanzania, as we know, especially for girls and the people in the community who are the risk or the victims of violence when traveling many miles to collect water. So Cloud innovate design water tank using a brick for homes and schools. The tank is helpful, especially urban area at the rain period. We are also having another project which is biosand water filter. In addition to water, we have come up with an innovation of BSF, we call it biosand water filter. This is a project or innovative project that we're using as sand to treat water. The technology has been founded by Dr. Dale Livingston from USA in 2010, while he is living in Kenya. So we're trying to teach the community to use the contaminated water diseases, so to make them to be healthy. We have also having a project for beekeeping. Beekeeping has a great potential and empower vulnerable population within our society. It generates income, and in addition to sell honey. But also the wax can be used to make a candle, which you can use it at our home or our family. We are having also poetry raising, sanitary pad sewing, eradicating poverty through providing women with skills and the source of revenue. Women tailor clothes and produce reusable sanitary pads, addressing health and menstruation, especially during our young girls, especially at rural area, experience difficult situation during their menstruation. So sanitary pads made locally seem to be much helpful for them. We run also at school. We have education. In this, we are focusing on vocational training and formal education. And this one, it is much helpful because we are emphasizing it doesn't consider the age, youth, adults, who all are allowed to or are accepted to join the school. And this is the people who have been missed the school. We have the many numbers of women and the youth who miss the school due to various circumstances. So we innovate another way how we can capture them to bring them back to school. As we know, education is the key of the problem. So we decided to capture them, to put them in school, despite of their age, to put them together in order to get the formal education, also to get it vocational training. I can allow my colleague to add more about what you are running here.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Zachariah Joseph, Secretary of CLOUD here in Tanzania. Mr. Kennedy is my director, but has elaborated the details. But mostly, our project is engaging more in standard goals development number 4 and SDG number 6. Standard development goals number 4 that touches to education and the opportunities for all. While standard development goals number 6 is based on the water and the sanitation, as we have this whole project in water tanks, catchment, and biosand filtration. As well as standard goals development number 5 that empowers women to have equal opportunities as men. So we try to cover some of development goals that are run by UNDP. These all help us to have a clear guide, and the most of our goals and the plans lie on standard development goals to ensure that we provide something of tangible, especially to education. 40 years back, Tanzania had a problem of engaging women into socio-economical productive models. So at the moment, most of women are jobless because had no formal education. So it was difficult for them to have a vocational training skill to let them have the ability of employing into different productive models. So following this problem, 10 years back, our government has come to engage women 50 by 50% so that they have equal opportunities as men. So by then, the government has developed a program, special education for those people who miss education for several purposes. As Mr. Kennedy explained, that there are some people who didn't get education, for example, women due to early pregnancy and social harassment and discrimination of women. So there are a group of women who lack education in a normal procedure at the early stage. So you find that when they are more than 20 years old, they have an access to go for secondary school education. So they study secondary school education in 2 years instead of normal of 4 years. Normally in Tanzania is 4 years secondary school education, that is ordinary. And the higher level is 2 years. So, but for those who didn't have an opportunity to go for secondary school education, they have only 2 years. They study for 2 years, and the examination they see is the same examination as the normal examination they see to normal procedures. So they all have the same qualification. The qualification for those who study for 2 years and those who study for 4 years is the same. Also for high level education, secondary education, the same. They study for 1 year, but they sit for the examination. The same examination that is set for those who are in normal procedure is the same as them who are in special case. So we find that they have qualification as those who went for normal procedure. So we opted to have such kind of support. That is a qualifying test. So we receive them. They just pay very little for supporting teachers, for supporting the consultants and some educational materials. So they are capable of getting education. And we have a number of students who are at university at the moment. And when you come to Tanzania, we come to find those who are at university and others have completed their employees. So this is very helpful. And most of girls, they have opportunity as men. So this has made us have a support to our community. And we expect it in times to come to have more access of receiving many girls in the street, because many of them, they lack normal way of getting an education.
Thank you, Zachariah and Kennedy. If I may just move us on, then we'll have time to have questions in the end, if that's okay. And I just wanted to end with Kennedy's slide about inviting new partners. Did you want to just say a word about that, Kennedy, before we move forward?
Thank you. In addition, Mara, dear friends, we invite all universities to join our work. When you join us, you visit, crowd, and engage with our community and the project. We also invite you to suggest ways we can innovate and improve our design. We also invite you to help us conducting research and community assessment. We also inviting you to partner with us on grants with the focus on internet and the projects and the technologies that you are innovating in our community. Dear friends, we also inviting you to suggest other ways which you think we can collaborate for more successfully. But also, as you can see down there, we have a Facebook site. You can visit, then you can have a look for what kind of jobs and projects we are running in our community. You have many, but we mentioned just a few. But when you visit that site in Facebook, as it's written there, you can visit a lot of job, a lot of work that you are practicing or you are doing at our community in Tanzania. We welcome you to engage with us, collaborate with us in many innovative models so that we can come up with a success story in our communities at large. Thank you, Mara.
Thank you so much, Kennedy and Zachariah. And we're going to move right to Christopher Romano, a faculty member from the University of Buffalo, who is engaging with Kennedy and Kennedy's work in Clio, and will be working with Dan to take a group of students to visit this January. Take it over, Chris.
Thanks, Mara. So as Mara mentioned, I am an architect and educator by training. And obviously I focus on the built environment. And so that's the kind of lens in which we'll be engaging our partners, Kennedy and Zachariah, in Tanzania in just a few months. The research that I am going to present to you, which we've been working on for about 1 year, which has been sponsored and connects directly to Mara's experiential learning program. Actually, that was the seed funding that kicked off this entire process, is around the kind of scope of building technology and building science with the focus on structures, using local materials and material performance. I'll use the moniker of this slide, Soilworks, to describe what I'll talk about, which is really using mud, and not in any way a derogatory term, but how can we think about globally making a better brick? And that's really been the foundation of the work that we've been participating in, and connects a lot with what Kennedy spoke about, which is the need to kind of build entrepreneurial enterprises around brick making to solve some of these larger sociocultural issues. And obviously this is not a new technology. It really tries to reposition that we all, no matter where we are from or what our economic climate is, should be looking more locally when it comes to the way we consume our natural resources. A lot of this work exists, but it's no longer around. It's returned back to the earth. And that, again, I'll try and convince everyone is not necessarily a bad thing. And I always like to kind of compare my locale to the global locale and say that the quality of the way in which we live and inhabit planet Earth is not based on whether we're building with industrialized, synthetic kind of manufactured materials versus things directly from the ground beneath us. It's really a matter of how they're assembled and how the community kind of works together to use what they have efficiently, use the kind of free materials that nature provides right below our feet. And so I did a kind of an examination, and a lot of people think that building with mud or dirt or the soil beneath our feet is something that really happens near the equator within kind of the Africa, India centric, but that's not true. It's everywhere in the world. It's still quite plentiful, and it does reside in entirely industrialized populations as well. So I started this research about why not buffalo, why not colder climates? Why do we only see these things? And so I think this is knowledge that I'm hoping to share within Tanzania, but then bring back to Buffalo and continue to pursue deploying this technology in my own hometown. I'll position the science behind this is that just like our kind of food pyramid, which we're all kind of ran away from as children, the construction industry also has one, and that we should kind of wean ourselves off of some of the high energy materials like aluminum and metal and steel and iron, and kind of move down the chart into some of the kind of more hardy things like earth. And if we can kind of wean ourselves even off of concrete, and I'll explain why. So how can we balance our diet in the way that we build out our environment, and how can that help the people in which we're trying to serve? And it all comes down to too much fire or too much heat. And that's really the kind of carbon cycle that's the data is telling us is beginning to kind of harm us all. We just need to kind of move away from the firing processes in the way in which we make things and consume things. And so a lot of this research questions started about how can we make a locally sourced, low carbon building material that we could deploy globally using the resources which already existed. So we didn't have to import any external system. We could just take these naturally occurring things like sand and soil and go from a very raw to a very refined, and do it all on the site without any sort of transportation, and do it with the people that were living in those areas and who are going to utilize those spaces. And so a lot of this means we've got to wean ourselves off of things that last for 100 years. We don't need to do that anymore. We don't need to make super strong things. We can kind of lighten the diet in every way possible and make durable, safe, high-performing structures. So where does all this kind of stuff come from? It's really just below our feet. You know, it's about 6 feet down, maybe a little bit higher in Africa, and you've just got to kind of go dig for it. So we started these experiments with our students here in Buffalo in the kind of glacial tills. This is a group of architecture, geology, and graduate students kind of just digging this free material out of the earth. And we'd like to come to Tanzania, and we are in fact coming with a pretty diverse group in just a few months to pursue exactly the same research, but just in a different locale. And really, we want to test that along with the system that Zachariah was speaking about, and Kennedy as well. And so we've drawn, as Mara said, trying to connect the study abroad to the experiential learning, to the ENL program in which she's set up, students from over 10 different majors that surround the sciences. And my work is really how can we take the kind of natural and life sciences and apply them directly using this NGO partnership model that Mara was kind of really spearheading, and that Dan, given that he has connections in country, has really pioneered these super amazing opportunities for faculty and for students. And so it's obviously built around, this is probably a familiar diagram we've all been talking about, built around these broader goals of sustainability. And so I'll try and take a second to just say, how does the work that we're doing start to connect in the workshops we do? How can making a better brick and really engineering the brick to be longer lasting and less carbon or more carbon neutral start to address the kind of water shortages that we just heard about? How can we do that to sort of give jobs to people that don't have jobs? And how can that collectively increase the well-being of the community when we start to think about drinkability and sanitation? All of these things become interconnected when you start to refine this process of space making within the built environment using local materials. And so we'll bring our kind of science with us, and that's part of the kind of contribution of adding value that Mara was talking about. And we'll really figure out how to cook up these recipes depending on whether we're using buffalo soils or Tanzanian soils. And so this will be the fun part to engage with when we get in country this winter. And we'll try and sort of use this as an opportunity to expand our own data and collect some valuable data that we can bring back and continue this analytical process. And all of this is tied around a pretty immersive tactile experience that Dan was talking about. You have to touch the materials to get to know them. You have to speak to the people to get to understand them. That not everything can be done remotely or virtually, even though we tried for a period of 3 years. So this is our lab, and we're taking a series of kind of international students from all over, in this case, a student from Iran who grew up with these techniques, who's teaching some of the domestic students how to make a better brick. It all comes down to a lot what I call myself is just someone who's kind of interested in gluing the world back together in every way imaginable. You know, social, cultural, kind of economic, intellectual. I just want to stick the world back together in a slightly more positive way. And it's comes down to kind of human power. So this machine is the same one that Kennedy showed. We have one thanks to Mara's program. It arrived a few years ago, and we've taken up the research directly to just how can we make and deal with the simple concept of measuring the density of the earth. And how can we simply use compression, very simple tectonic physics-based terms, to really analyze and standardize the process so we can ensure the kind of safety metrics and performance metrics that we are all governed by internationally. And so we'll bring some tech with us, some gear that we're procuring, and we've been testing here to kind of move not just away from the tactile, but to bring some metrics that we can then build on the in-country knowledge that Kennedy's organization of CLOW is moving quite fast and successfully. Sometimes we'll sort of bring technology to it. If we can't bring it with us, we can do it certainly over our Zoom calls, and that's how we've been engaging thus far. And we've been moving along nicely in preparation for our in-person trip. And so we have a lot that the university can leverage in terms of technology. And this is some of the kind of science we can bring to Tanzania through our students, through ourselves, and through Dan and myself, who will lead this group this coming winter. So I'm super excited. These are a bit of just the eye candy, but again, looking kind of under the scope to see the sort of glue. Again, how do we see the invisible, get into the science, zoom in, look a little bit closer. These are the kinds of techniques that we train our students and that we certainly want to share with our collaborators. It's all based on some good math and some good science. And so I won't bore you with that because that's not the time nor the place. But nonetheless, I feel that this use of mud in some of the places I've visited, some of the highest performing, most conscientious, most amazing spaces are in fact built of architecture as earth. And I think there are many, many good examples that cross every single culture and time period within our civilizations that are proof. And so if you think about if you live in a hot climate, some of the most thermally reactive spaces are built of earth. If you live in a hot climate, some of the coolest spaces that I visited are built of earth. And they look a little bit different, but again, it's all just a measure of the quality of the ingredients and the kind of alchemy of cooking up the right recipe that I hope that we can do together. And I also like to end, final slide, on the fact that this material is probably the most inclusive. This is one of the amazing examples by Francis Carey, who's a colleague that's done some wonderful work in West Africa, and we hope to do the same in East Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. I just have a couple slides to close, and I've been looking at the questions that have been coming in. This is one example of a faculty connecting in exciting ways. We have a group of engineering students who are going to be connecting as well. And we have more and more interest on the part of faculty and departments to make meaningful connections between what's happening in the curriculum and in the classes and in the broader world. So tremendous potential. But I want to talk about impacts lastly on our partners, because we are really interested in leveraging our engagement to make this catalytic change that we talked about. So this is evolving quickly. And just to mention, I think I have some of my participants here. I wish you could see them. But we have formed a group of some of our partners. So we have right now about 25 members of what we're calling GKIC, which is the Global Collaborative or Community Innovation Collaborative. And we have folks from all of these countries, mostly from Uganda and Tanzania right now. But this idea of how do they, our NGO partners, leverage our engagement to have a lasting impact beyond our individual partners. And so if we think about this value chain, if you will, of leveraging and creating value and tying it back to the ecosystems and the SDGs and the targets in ways that we can measure and optimize. So this group has a lot of momentum going. They have a WhatsApp group and they're planning some meetups, some collaboration around grants. And then yet another way that we're leveraging this is connecting through K through 12. So imagine if these NGO leaders and those who are doing the work of the SDGs also get to share their projects and their challenges with young people around the world who are looking for opportunities to learn and grow and contribute. And so the potential, I think, is extraordinary. The interest is there. The capacity is there because there are literally thousands of NGOs, if not more, doing this work around the world. And so this final idea, which to me is more than just an idea, it's coming to life, is this: imagine if we could map the impacts of engagement, experiential learning, however you want to think about it, to the communities and ecosystems that stand to benefit, using dynamic assessment to optimize and incentivize further. This, I think, is really the promise of the transformational partnerships that we're all working to support. So thank you so much for your attention. I know we just have a couple of minutes because the final session is going to be wrapping up. And so I think we have answered the questions in the chat. I'm going to look and see if there's any lasting ones. I think I've given you a link. I'm going to put my own email back in here again. And I would encourage anyone who wants to explore some of these ideas. These are really just getting started, and we welcome participation as we think about this work as well. So thank you, everyone, and we look forward to the final session, and take care.